highway stretched across the American Midwest like a dark ribbon disappearing into endless forest. It was the kind of road truck drivers knew well. Miles of empty asphalt, radio static, and nothing but trees on both sides. Around 2:13 a.m., the only headlights cutting through the darkness belonged to a long-haul freight truck. Inside the cab sat Daniel Mercer, 34 years old, quiet, a man who had spent more nights on highways than in his own bed. The dashboard lights painted his tired face in a dim green glow. The radio crackled softly. Daniel rubbed his eyes and glanced at the GPS. Still 4 hours until his next scheduled stop. Outside the windshield, the forest looked endless and strangely silent. Daniel muttered to himself quietly, "Just a few more hours. Then coffee." Daniel Mercer hadn't always been a truck driver. He grew up in Boise, Idaho, in a small blue house at the end of a quiet street. His father had been a mechanic. His mother worked nights at a hospital. Life had always been simple. Dinner together when possible, football games on Sundays, and long conversations about leaving the small town someday. Daniel had tried college once, but it never felt right. The road did. The first time he drove across state lines in a truck, something clicked. The silence, the distance, the freedom. It felt like the world finally made sense. Now, 10 years later, the road was his life. But nights like this one, even experienced drivers felt uneasy. Daniel sighed and tapped the steering wheel. Should have taken that last rest stop. A few minutes later, Daniel glanced at the GPS again and frowned. A small icon blinked on the screen, a gas station symbol. But that didn't make sense. Daniel had driven this route before, many times. There wasn't supposed to be a gas station here, not for another 60 miles. He leaned closer to the screen. The label under the icon read, Mercer Fuel Station. Daniel blinked. Mercer. The same as his last name. He chuckled quietly. Coincidence. But something about it felt strange. 10 minutes later, Daniel saw it. Dim yellow lights glowing through the trees. A small structure just off the highway. An old gas station. The building looked wrong. Paint peeling from the walls, rust covering the pumps, weeds growing through cracked concrete. It looked like a place that had been abandoned for years. And yet, the lights were on. Daniel slowed the truck. The parking lot was empty. No other cars. No people. Just the wind whispering through the forest. For a moment, Daniel almost kept driving. Something deep in his gut told him he should. But then he looked at the fuel gauge. Almost empty. He sighed. All right. Quick stop. The truck slowly turned into the gas station. The headlights swept across the building. And for a split second, Daniel thought he saw something move behind the station. A tall shadow, standing perfectly still, watching the truck arrive. The truck engine rumbled as Daniel slowly parked beside the first gas pump. The sound echoed strangely through the empty station. Then he turned the engine off. And suddenly, everything went silent. Too silent. No cars, no insects, no distant highway noise. Just the soft buzz of the old yellow light above the pumps. Daniel stepped down from the truck. The cold night air hit his face. He stretched his back and looked around. The place felt wrong. Like the entire station had been frozen in time. The pumps were covered in rust,
The glass windows of the small shop were dirty and dark, yet the lights inside were still on. Daniel walked toward the pump, but when he grabbed the nozzle, it didn't move. It was locked in place. He frowned. Seriously? He glanced toward the building. Maybe someone was inside, watching. Daniel called out toward the shop. Hello? No answer, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. Daniel slowly walked toward the small convenience store. Each step echoed in the empty parking lot. The glass door stood slightly open, just a few inches. It creaked softly as the wind pushed it. Daniel stopped. That uneasy feeling returned again. Gas stations on highways were usually bright, busy, full of coffee machines and humming refrigerators. But this place felt forgotten, like it didn't belong to the present anymore. Daniel pushed the door open. The bell above it rang, a soft, metallic ding. The sound echoed through the empty store. But no one came. No clerk, no customer, nothing. Just dusty shelves and flickering lights. Daniel spoke again, louder this time. Hello? Anyone working here? Still nothing.
Daniel walked deeper into the store. His boots echoed across the old tiled floor. Most of the shelves were empty. The refrigerators along the wall were dark and unplugged. Then he noticed something strange. The cash register was on. A small green light blinked on its screen. Daniel stepped closer. A piece of paper stuck out from the receipt printer. He pulled it out. The paper was yellow and fragile, like it had been sitting there for years. Daniel read the date printed on the top, and his stomach tightened. October 17th, 1998. Daniel frowned. That can't be right. That was almost 25 years ago, but the electricity in the building was clearly still running, which meant someone had been here recently. Right? Daniel slowly looked around the store again. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone anymore, like someone was standing somewhere in the dark aisles, watching him read that receipt. Daniel folded the old receipt slowly. The paper felt brittle in his hands. For a moment, he just stood there, listening. The store felt colder now. The buzzing light above the counter flickered again. And then, he heard it. A sound, very faint, from somewhere deeper inside the building. It sounded like something dragging across the floor. Daniel froze. The sound came again. A slow scrape, like a chair moving, or something heavy being pulled. He looked toward the back hallway behind the counter. A narrow corridor disappeared into darkness. Daniel swallowed. Truck drivers hear strange things on the road. Wind, animals, old buildings settling. But this sound didn't feel normal. Daniel spoke quietly. Hello? No response. Then the sound stopped, completely, and the silence returned. Daniel stepped behind the counter. He didn't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. But something about this place was pulling him deeper. He walked toward the hallway. The light from the store barely reached the corridor. The walls were covered with old posters, most of them faded beyond recognition. Halfway down the hallway, Daniel noticed something strange. The power box. The metal panel was open. Inside, the wires had been cut. All of them. Daniel frowned. That didn't make sense. If the power had been cut,
Then how were the lights still on? How was the register working? A cold feeling crawled up his spine. Slowly, Daniel turned around, back toward the store. And that's when he noticed something. The glass entrance door was now closed. He was sure he had left it open. Daniel whispered to himself, "Okay, that's weird." Daniel walked quickly back into the main store. The door was definitely closed now. The small bell above it moved slightly, like it had rung recently. Daniel stared at it. Then he heard something outside. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, crunching on the gravel of the parking lot. Daniel's chest tightened. Someone was out there. Finally. Maybe the station owner, maybe another truck driver. Daniel moved toward the window, but the glass was so dirty he could barely see outside. He wiped a clear spot with his sleeve and looked out toward his truck. The headlights were still on, lighting the parking lot. And standing just beyond the edge of the light, near the trees, was a tall figure. Completely still. Not moving. Just watching the store. Watching Daniel. From the darkness. Daniel whispered under his breath, "Who the hell is that?" Daniel kept staring through the dirty window. The tall figure near the trees still hadn't moved, not even an inch. The truck's headlights stretched across the gravel, but the light stopped just before the trees, and the figure stood exactly there, right where the light ended. Daniel felt his heartbeat getting faster. Maybe it was another truck driver, maybe someone who lived nearby. But something about the way the figure stood was wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Like it had been standing there for a long time. Watching. Waiting. Daniel pushed the door open and stepped outside. "Hey!" His voice echoed through the empty station. "Do you work here?" The figure didn't answer. It didn't move. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the figure stepped forward. Just one step. The headlights reached its legs now. Daniel squinted. The person looked tall, very tall, wearing what looked like an old jacket. But the face was still hidden in shadow. Daniel walked a few steps closer. Gravel crunched under his boots. "Listen," Daniel said. "My truck's almost empty. I just need gas." Still no answer. The figure took another slow step. Now it stood halfway between the trees and the truck. And that's when Daniel noticed something strange. The man's clothes looked old. Not just worn. Old. Like something from another time.
Daniel stopped walking. Something in his gut told him not to get closer. The man finally spoke. His voice was low, dry, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. "Fuel." Daniel blinked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "The pumps don't work." The man tilted his head slightly. Then he slowly pointed toward the building. "The pump works." Daniel frowned. "No, it doesn't. I tried." The man didn't respond. He just kept staring at Daniel. And then, very slowly, he smiled. But the smile didn't look normal. It stretched too wide across his face. And in the bright headlights, Daniel finally saw the man's eyes. They looked pale, almost gray, and completely empty. The man whispered, "You just have to wait." Daniel felt a cold chill run down his spine. He turned around for just a second, toward his truck, toward the safety of the cab. But when he looked back at the man,
The man was gone. Completely gone. The parking lot was empty again. Daniel spun around quickly. The trees were still, silent. No footsteps, no movement. Nothing. "Okay," Daniel whispered. "This place is seriously messed up." He walked quickly back toward his truck, but as he reached the door, something made him freeze. The truck's engine was off, the lights were off, and the truck wasn't where he had parked it. Daniel slowly looked across the parking lot. His truck now sat near the far edge of the station, about 20 feet away from where he left it, like someone had moved it while he was inside. Daniel stood there for a moment, trying to understand what he was seeing. His truck was definitely not where he left it. Just a few minutes ago, it had been parked beside the gas pump. Now it sat near the far end of the station, half swallowed by darkness. Daniel felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Maybe he had parked it there. Maybe he was just tired. Long hours on the road could mess with your head. He walked slowly across the gravel. Each step sounded louder than it should have. The forest around the station was completely still. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just silence. When Daniel reached the truck, the driver's door was open. He was absolutely sure he had closed it. Daniel whispered under his breath, "I definitely closed that." Daniel climbed back into the truck. The seat was cold, colder than it should have been, like no one had been sitting there for hours. He grabbed the key and turned it. The engine struggled for a moment, then it started. A deep rumble filled the night. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Okay, let's get out of here." But before he could shift gears, the radio suddenly turned on by itself. Static exploded through the speakers, loud, sharp. Daniel jumped slightly. He reached for the dial, but before he could touch it, a voice came through the static, faint, broken, like an old recording. "Help me." Daniel froze. The voice continued. "Don't stop here." The signal cracked again. Then another voice joined, and another. Dozens of voices whispering over each other, all saying the same thing. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop." Daniel quickly turned the radio off. The cabin fell silent again. But his heart was pounding now, hard, too hard. He rubbed his face. "Just static," he whispered. "Just radio interference." Then he looked up, at the windshield, and his breath stopped, because reflected in the glass, behind the truck, something was standing there. A tall shape, right behind the trailer. Daniel turned his head slowly, looking through the side mirror. The figure stood in the headlights again. The same man, the same empty eyes. But this time, there were more of them. Shapes emerging from the forest, tall, thin, standing between the trees, watching the truck, watching Daniel. Daniel whispered, "No way." Daniel's hands tightened around the steering wheel. The figures near the trees were still standing there, not moving, just watching. Dozens of pale shapes, half hidden in the fog. Daniel slammed the truck into gear. The engine roared. The truck rolled forward across the gravel. He didn't care about fuel anymore. He just needed to leave. The truck shot out of the station entrance and back onto the highway. Daniel pressed the accelerator harder. The forest rushed past the windows. Miles of dark road stretched ahead. Finally, the gas station lights disappeared in the distance. Daniel exhaled. His heartbeat slowly started to calm. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe his mind was playing tricks. Then he looked ahead, and his stomach dropped. The highway was gone. The road ended in darkness. Just trees standing across the pavement, blocking the way forward, like the road had never existed at all.
Daniel slammed the brakes. The truck screeched to a stop. His breathing became fast, confused, panicked. He turned the truck around quickly. Gravel and dirt sprayed under the tires, and when the truck faced the other direction, Daniel froze. Because the gas station was there again, right behind him. The same yellow lights, the same rusty pumps, exactly where he had just left it. Impossible. The truck rolled slowly forward, almost on its own, the engine idling. And as Daniel stared at the station, he noticed something new. There were trucks parked there now. Old ones, dozens of them, covered in rust, their doors hanging open, as if the drivers had stepped out and never came back. Daniel's radio turned on again. The static whispered softly, and one final voice spoke. A tired voice. A familiar voice. Daniel's own voice, from the speaker. "You should have kept driving." The headlights flickered, and the station lights slowly went dark, one by one, until the entire forest disappeared into blackness, and the road was silent again.